So my name's Thomas Holdcroft. I'm an engineer at Taylor Wimpey out of the West Mids region. So I started as an assistant civil engineer about 11 years ago, and I was working with retaining walls obviously from that point onwards really. In terms of challenges that I've faced for traditional retaining walls, it's really just since I've been in house building for the last 4 years or so. Customers, obviously, once retaining walls get over a certain height, when they're in traditional masonry, don't tend to really like them. They can feel a bit like a prison yard sort of vibe if it's just 3 meters high of red brick on every face. And then just obviously construction times are quite high. You've got to get a professional bricklayer in to construct those. So yeah, got to take all those things into account. The key factors that made Secura stand out for us against, say, any of your competitors really, the colour choices for one, and the finish. Obviously, there are only 3 at the moment, but they all sort of tie in with the sort of finishes we're expecting to see on site anyway, in terms of our brick choices, what the councils like to see, what our architects like to use, etc., etc. So there's always a finish to tie in with generally. And I think the size of the blocks as well, because they're a little bit larger than some competitors, I actually think it doesn't feel as like compacted and condensed. It feels a little bit more grand, and not a coin of phrase, a little bit more just cohesive, I would say, because you've got these like smaller sort of blocks. It just feels a little bit like a Lego set almost, where these feel a little bit more on a bigger scale. So yeah, our Lindridge Road development has 20 metres of fall over what is 178 unit site, so it's not a huge site, but we've got approximately a 1 in 20 gradient from the highest point of the site in the southeast down to the lowest point of the site in the northwest, which is where the pond's located next to the watercourse. And essentially our roads it's a triangular shaped parcel, so our roads had to go against the grade and then back again. So as a result, we basically had 3 quite large platforms formed by, say, 3 or 4 metre high retaining walls. So those 3 or 4 metre high retaining walls essentially like split the site into 3 working platforms for our ground worker. So what it really helped with though, getting those in early, which is why Tobermore was a great choice for us. We could get them in really quickly, segregate the site into essentially 3 working areas, and just the ground worker could then just work their way around, and it helped separate things and keep things from a CDM point of view and an earthworks point of view just separated and sequenced really nicely. So having the Secura grand walls at 4 metres, up to 4 metres high on Lindridge Road has been really helpful, because as I mentioned previously, having traditional masonry walls at that sort of height, it just doesn't look good, especially with the constraints of, say, like a 10, 12 metre garden. If you've got a 4 metre high red brick wall that's got almost no differentiation between the colours on it, on all sides, or at least on the back wall, it can really start to feel boxed in really quickly. What actually helps, although it does take up a little more space, is the 7-degree batter backwards, because it doesn't feel as imposing as having a dead straight masonry wall leaning towards you. So that helps. And then obviously aesthetically, in my opinion, and pretty much all of our customers on there at the moment agree, they just much prefer it. You've got a choice of colours as well, which helps. Getting onto site initially, the speed of installation for the Secura system really helped us, because we had to segregate the site into working platforms fairly quickly. I wouldn't say half the speed of a masonry retaining wall, but probably pretty close to that. So our ground workers could just get on really quickly, get the walls in and split the site into some nice working platforms to use. So on Lindridge Road, which is the main project that I've used the product on, we've probably only got about 7 or 8 occupants at the moment, but of those 7 or 8 occupants, we've had very positive feedback in terms of the aesthetic of the wall and obviously build quality, etc., which partly down to our ground workers, but it's an easy system to install, which obviously we can just give it to them and trust that they're going to do it properly. Also, the support from you guys as well in terms of your back of house staff, I guess, and the technical team is really useful. But yeah, customers seem to absolutely love the finish, fits in with the bricks that we use as well on that particular site. So yeah, in terms of managing space and sort of harsh level changes on site, Secura has been really helpful. For example, if we're trying to fit a retaining wall in between two plots, where typical house builders, we have 2 meters in between plots sometimes. You've got a concrete backfill option, I believe, which sort of really brings that backfill down as opposed to using, say, a geogrid. I think it practically halves it again. So it allows us to fit the walls into a tighter space where usually we might not be able to. On Lindridge Road, we've got quite a few sort of back-to-back garden situations, and because it's such a steep site, our gardens are in a approximately 1 in 12 gradient, which is quite steep, probably the steepest we'd ever like to go. We've got some sleeper retaining walls in each garden, which sort of help us alleviate those levels a little bit, but then we cannot escape the fact that we've got a 4-meter wall that's got to go in somewhere. And again, your product, it can go in quickly, fairly easily. We don't need to get professional bricklayers in, and it looks a lot better and far less imposing than, say, a brick retaining wall. So I caught up with our commercial department on sort of what sort of cost savings we were likely to see. I don't think we've done the full sort of, the dust hasn't completely settled yet, as we're halfway through the job still, but I was told somewhere in between the region of sort of 10 to 20, maybe a little bit more percent, versus, say, traditional masonry. I know you guys have got the cost tool as well, which is really going to help us going forward. If another developer or contractor was considering using Secura, the main piece of advice I'd say would probably just get on board as quickly as possible, because the designs change, every other month at the sort of beginning of the project. So if we've got you guys involved, you do a lot of the heavy lifting for us, so to speak, in terms of design, recommendations, and also we can even send you our external works layout or our site layout. And I've experienced you sort of recommending areas where perhaps we could change this or that and just make things more efficient in the round. So it's not just the fact that you're providing us with walls, it's more of almost like a second look at our designs, which is really helpful. Yeah, so we've had a great experience using Secura on our previous projects, or I personally definitely have. I'm looking at another 2 future projects at the moment, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm probably going to consider you guys for every project going forward. Our commercial team, again, find the sort of estimate tool really helpful at the front end, because you can just plug in, you might have limited data as well, which is usually the case if we're looking at a land bid, for example. There's an area of land, there's a land pack of technical information that will get given. Sometimes it's quite limited and we're not in a position to go out and get more because time constraints, the bid's in 3 weeks. We need to do what we can to try and run a viability. So having an estimate tool that we can sort of mess around with and tinker with, and what if the ground conditions were X, Y, or Z, really helps the commercial team to have a bit of flex in the land bid.